What does Hisoka do now? Hisoka's destiny is ultimately one of two things: death or boredom. He either dies, like for real this time, he dies fighting a strong battle opponent and probably releasing his most powerful orgasm before releasing his life from this mortal plane. That, or Hisoka beats everyone and has no one left to pique his interest, as our horny battle clown is left lingering, simply suffering from success. This world, mate, it just isn't made for someone like Hisoka anymore. But he can do something to change that. And here's what the thing is. From this point, and I am completely serious about this, Hisoka's best option would be to launch an impromptu political career and become chairman of the Hunter Association. This makes so much more sense than it has any right to. Because Hisoka already acts as kind of his own chairman, Hisoka has a history of using the Hunter Association as testing grounds for his own personal exams, once during the actual Hunter exam, and then again during the election, when he only showed up to grade the Hunters with his special rating system. And this is the way for Hisoka to mold the world into his own personal paradise. Not only that, but he has viable political support within the association, a lot more than you may realize, and a genuine path to chairmandom. So firstly, let's establish why this is the correct move. The Hunter Association is a completely independent organization. They're not under the control of any specific government. However, with that said, the Hunter Association is an organization that is somewhat at the command of the V5, now the V6, I guess, because they were the ones that seem to have the authority to order Netero to undertake the Chimera Ant-Extermination mission. We only want one thing: the swift extermination of a dangerous species. We're not the experts here, you are. We just want them exterminated as quickly as possible, with Netero noting that the outcome was that the Hunter Association would take the full fallout of the Chimera Ant outbreak. This was the V5 hiring the Hunter Association, but it was a request that really couldn't be refused. So it's not as apolitical as it's made out to be. However, and I mean this without hyperbole, the Hunter Association does effectively rule the world. Of the top 100 richest people in the world, 60 of them are professional hunters. 60% of the world's richest people are members of the Hunter Association, and those 60 people have significant authority within the association. Many of them are in top positions, but also membership of the Hunter Association is calculated at just over 600. So on their own, they have 10% of voting power. And it's with this unparalleled authority that the chairman sets the agenda not just for the Hunter Association, but for the entire world. In fact, one of the reasons why the Hunter exam was such a brutal affair, with a very real chance of death for applicants, was because that was then Chairman Netero's agenda for the world. His desire was to push himself and find strong opponents. Sounds a bit familiar really, doesn't it? Isaac Netero valued strength above all else, and so the whole association was constructed according to power. One of the key selection criteria for the Zodiacs was the ability to spar with Netero whenever he saw fit. And for someone who oversaw the Hunter Association for at least half a century, Netero directly shapes the world we live in. The strong were granted high status and their pursuits were prioritized. And we can now directly contrast that against Cheadle's tenure as chairman. Cheadle's values are much less morally grey than Netero's. Cheadle is far more academically inclined and prioritizes intelligence as well as stability. And as one of her first acts, Cheadle radically reformed the Hunter exam. Previously, Netero's first phase was a purely physical test to run 80 kilometers through a tunnel. That, in his mind, was the absolute base that a hunter needed to meet. Meanwhile, Cheadle's first phase was a psychological evaluation designed to eliminate any candidate who held ill intent towards the association, as well as the upcoming Dark Continent voyage. But if Netero was still in charge, he probably would have said, no, let them cook. It's always more interesting to have people who try to undermine me. And I have no doubt that if Cheadle survives the Dark Continent voyage, then she will probably usher in something of a global renaissance, one where the world shifts its focus away from strength and more towards ideas and innovation. So all of this is a very long-winded way of saying that Hisoka's best move would be to become chairman of the Hunter Association, because then he gets to set the agenda. And if that agenda is sex fighting, then so be it. But who in their right mind would vote for Hisoka? Or for that matter, who out of their right mind would vote for him? Hisoka didn't even vote for himself during the chairman election. In fact, he didn't vote for anyone. But this is where things get very interesting. This isn't something a lot of people notice because the voting in the election is frustratingly layered and convoluted. I mean, there's a total of 9 voting rounds that Togashi subjects us to, but I want to draw everyone's attention to the very first round of voting, where Hisoka Hisoka actually received 2 votes, and thus was ranked in 35th place to be the next chairman of the Hunter Association. Who voted for Hisoka? Maybe Bisky because she thought he was hot? Maybe Pariston just to be a troll? Illumi may have also done so for whatever reason. Some people have also suggested Shalnark. But even at this stage, the Phantom Troop were not huge Hisoka supporters, and also he was absent from the election. The only person we know for a fact didn't vote for Hisoka is Hisoka himself, because this is the round of voting where he inserted the blank sheet. What this tells me is that somehow Hisoka has organic support within the organization. Whether it's troll support or people who actually want him to become the chairman, it doesn't matter. What matters is that he's not starting from zero. His political career already has some grassroots momentum. And 2 votes, it sounds like not many, but it's not anything to scoff at either. Most of the top 10 candidates in this round of voting got barely above 10 votes, so Hisoka is well and truly in this race. Now, in regards to the Hunter voter base, remember that most hunters within the association rose to their positions under Netero. They're the old guard, and they may not be pleased with the direction in which Cheadle takes the organization, because it's almost antithetical to Isaac Netero's principles. Hisoka and Netero are not shockingly different people. They both have extremely similar values and desires for life, which is to find the strong people and then to fight the strong people. The only real difference is that Hisoka's drive is tied towards his own sexual gratification. And to be fair, we don't know that Netero's was not tied to that. He just might have had a much more stern O-face. But there are many people within the association who would be in favor of a more strength-based approach. A sort of make the Hunter Association great again campaign. And here's the thing. Because Isaac Netero didn't discriminate by intention, it means that the Hunter Association has ended up with a lot of less than morally upstanding individuals. Hunters are not necessarily the good guys in this world. In fact, many of them are frankly reprehensible, and there's a lot of them. Pariston Hill is one of those individuals. He put on a nice, kind show, but this didn't fool anyone within the association. Pariston was a known quantity of power-hungry selfishness, and yet throughout the election, he retained a solid roughly 40% of support from the voting hunters. And ultimately, he did succeed in becoming the chairman. So Hisoka's path to this position is nowhere near unfeasible. He might not have the political instincts of Pariston, but roughly half the association are terrible people with terrible ideas. Terrible ideas that Hisoka would absolutely facilitate. And if those people see someone campaigning on their sick desires, then why not vote for him? I genuinely think Hisoka could win, especially with a solid campaign team and some alliances left over from the Pariston era. But it's only after he wins that the real work begins, because we've got to completely reform the Hunter exam. Hisoka is of course a natural examiner. It's a bit of a misconception that he was a candidate for the 287th exam, because from his perspective, Hisoka was the one conducting the exam. Hisoka very consistently uses the Hunter Association to host his own tests for non-consensual candidates. In the Misty Wetlands, Hisoka tested his candidates on one simple thing: fight or flight. And even though Hisoka himself acknowledged that running was the smarter option, he was grading candidates based on who stayed to fight him. Only 2 people passed this test: Leorio, who stood his ground, and Gon, who wasn't part of the initial test but who interrupted it. And in fact, for that, he got bonus points. Hisoka was so impressed that he even carried the unconscious Leorio to the end of the actual exam stage. Meanwhile, Kurapika failed this exam because he just kept running. And that's one of the many reasons why, of all of the characters, Hisoka expresses little to no interest in ever fighting Kurapika. Because of this moment right here, that's where he lost Hisoka's interest. So I imagine that the first round of Chairman Hisoka's Hunter exam would be very similar. Hisoka emerges in front of all the candidates, slaughters a group of them closest to him, utters something smug like, "Wow, so many dropouts already? This isn't making me erect at all." And from there, it's simple. Everyone who runs away from him fails the exam, but everyone willing to stay and fight moves on to phase 2. And Hisoka isn't going to waste any time here. If a candidate passes his initial phase, then they need to learn Nen ASAP. Gotta plant those fight seeds so that he can harvest the delicious battle crops. And the fastest way to reach his goal is to initiate all of the candidates. This is of course the quick and dirty path to unlocking aura control. It's very taboo, and generally Nen users have to undergo lengthy periods of meditation to unlock their aura. And among many of the reasons why initiation is not an accepted practice is because it often results in permanent injury and death. So the second phase test boils down to don't die. If you do, then that's on you, and if you don't, then I want you on me. And this is pretty much directly taken from the unspoken Heaven's Arena laws. When a candidate reaches the 200th floor, they are initiated whether they want to be or not. For the surviving applicants, they will then receive a comprehensive Nen education from genuinely one of the greatest Nen tutors on the planet. We often forget that Hisoka is one of the leading Nen academics in this world. He is a genuine genius of aura control and capable of dissecting complex aura formulae mid-battle, even being able to quickly diagnose Nen affinities without even having having seen someone use aura yet. Hisoka is also a very willing teacher to those he sees potential in. Hisoka hid very little for Gon, and in fact even gave him an in-depth lesson during their fight at Heaven's Arena. In fact, there was even a short exam at the end when Hisoka asked Gon to figure out when he'd attach Spongy Gun. And the reason for this openness is because why hide anything? The more knowledge that Hisoka hoards, the slower the growth of his crops. And he may even go so far as to facilitate development of their Nen abilities. This is probably the end of the Hunter exam. From here on, candidates are issued licenses, they're granted jobs and freedom and monies and such, but this is not the end of Hisoka's exam. In the long run, Hisoka needs to water and fertilize his crops by exposing them to high levels of danger. As chairman, he will no doubt accept incredibly deadly jobs and send in hunters who are wildly unprepared. Pressure creates diamonds after all. Hisoka may even host annual association tournaments to continue compounding that growth. He can also have his own set of zodiacs who present the most central opportunities to him. And then it's finally time. We've prepared enough. And there's a few different harvesting methods that Hisoka could choose. The first is the sneaky method of assigning a hunter a mission to kill him, or an even sneakier mission where a hunter gets assigned a decoy mission and Hisoka unexpectedly appears to challenge said hunter. Hisoka is of course a very sneaky man, and despite his Heaven's Arena appearances, he really does enjoy his privacy. It would also stop any unnecessary objections and political fallout within the association. However, if we wanted to be blunt and public about it, Hisoka may even set a condition that anyone is free to become chairman. However, to do so, they must kill him. And having undergone Hisoka's system, those who rise to the top will no doubt be on the power-hungrier side of things. Whatever the case, the intent behind the organization is to breed people who are capable of giving Hisoka a thrill, like the donut machine that perpetually feeds Homer on that one episode of The Simpsons. Hisoka's purpose would be to build an infinite machine that can entertain him for all eternity, or until he finally creates that one person who can bury him for good. And that's why Hisoka should be the next chairman of the Hunter Association.